Do you spend a ton of time training your SDRs only to find that they make the same mistake over and over again, take months to ramp, and have trouble making quota? Yoda AI by RingDNA delivers AI-powered conversation guidance so that every rep can sell like your top performer. In real time, deliver talking points that help reps overcome sales objections, stay on message, and beat the competition. You'll never have to endlessly repeat sales advice to reps again. It's easy to set up, easy to customize, and comes with out-of-the-box coaching best practices. Turn your team into a revenue-driving machine today with Yoda AI by RingDNA. To learn more, visit ringdna.com/Yoda. That's ringdna.com/YODA.
My definition of wisdom is the intersection of both knowledge and experience. So what I found was the consultants had massive knowledge, far bigger brains than mine, better education, the whole thing. And in my case, paid $6 million a year for that consulting firm deck. And board loved it, great information. The problem is there was no E. And again, I'm not being critical of that. It's a brilliant business model. But for me as a leader, there was no E. There was nobody to tell me, okay, here's all these facts. Now, guess what? I've done this, and if you go down road A, you're going to get run over.
Hi, friends. Welcome to the Sales Enablement Podcast. I'm your host, Andy Paul. That was Craig Lemasters. Craig's the author of a very interesting book titled Unstuck: How to Activate and Unlock the Wisdom of Others. He's also CEO of GXG, a consulting firm based in Atlanta. And in our conversation, we're going to talk about what it means to be stuck as an organization and as an individual, and more importantly, how to get unstuck, per the title of Craig's excellent book. In short, if you're not making progress at the speed you want to be, if your day-to-day work is a flurry of activity without a lot of impact to show for it, then you're definitely stuck. And in our conversation, Craig and I talk about the impact of being stuck. And then we dive into a learning technique that Craig uses when he's, when he was running a $2 billion organization to help him get unstuck. It's called rapid cycle learning, otherwise known as wisdom-based learning. So we dig into that. And it's also then built into the 5 steps that Craig has defined for helping you get unstuck. I love these, especially the intellectual humility and vulnerability step. If you're stuck and you want to get unstuck, you can only make it happen if you admit that you need help. Well, we get into this and much, much more. But before we get to Craig, I want to remind you to subscribe to this podcast wherever you listen to it. And if you subscribe, we'd certainly appreciate it if you could also give us your feedback about how we're doing in the form of a review. So thank you. All right, let's jump into it. Greg, welcome to the show.
Oh, thanks for having me, Andy. I love your work and love this topic. So looking forward to our conversation.
Oh, great. Well, thanks. You've recently published a book called Unstuck: How to Activate and Unlock the Wisdom of Others, which wasn't written specifically for sales, but certainly applies to sales in many respects. I certainly
absolutely
read it with a sales lens, if you will, and we'll get into that. So, First of all, it's excellent book and perfect length book.
Thank you for that. That was a controversial thing. I mean, who writes just over 100-page book? But I've actually gotten more compliments on that than maybe the content. So I don't know how to take it, but I'll take it. Thank you.
Well, the content was good. It was. I'm laughing because I'm struggling myself because I just submitted first draft of my latest manuscript to my publisher, and actually, as I like to say, it was the first draft of the latest book.
I love it.
And between the second and third first drafts, and I'm trying to write a 150-page book max.
That's awesome.
I love it. Yeah, but between drafts, I added like almost 100 pages of content.
It's hard. I believe it.
It's like the Mark Twain thing, or
I
attribute to Mark Twain. I wanted to write
I hear you. I hear you. I was up to 250 and got some super wise counsel to use our own business model. A very wise person said, "This is not a 250. I mean, it may be for you, but because the concepts I'm working on are very simple, and I wanted to make them that way." So,
Yeah.
I had a lot of great help getting it to that size. But
Well, yeah, I do
good
too,
luck with your
and
journey. Yeah,
I'm taking inspiration from you on that.
I
So
appreciate it.
maybe not 100, but we'll get it down.
That's
So,
awesome.
so what was the motivation to write the book?
Well, it really came from clients. I mean, and I got into this to do this advisory work, after I did corporate work. That's, sort of my history and story. I've got a chance to run a big company, and I just bumped into so many really wise people and started kind of working on what became the GXG methodology, and it worked. I went out for a couple of years, and it was a blast because it had worked for me running a big company, and then it started to work for others. And so I just had clients that said, "Hey, this is pretty cool. Why don't you put it in a book?" And candidly, I'd like to say that was a big lifetime vision or dream, but I never thought about it. And just had some really cool people around me that sort of helped me do it and think about it. And yeah, and it's been great. Again, I didn't write this for as an best-selling author concept. I think the work is extremely important, and having it documented has been incredible. And we've gotten great response to it. And one of the things that was really important to me, I don't know if you picked up on it, but I thought I only want to write this if I can get 6, 8, 10 operators, people that have actually used these concepts to endorse it. And I will tell you, my personal favorite part about the book is I just have amazing clients that have stood up for the book. And that was kind of the most important thing to me.
All right, well, let's take a step back and sort of dive into that. So one, you were at the time, you were CEO of an assurance company, one that many of our listeners probably interacted with at some point or another. If you bought like extended warranties and so on. So tell us, the company is Assurance. So tell us what Assurance did.
Yeah, exactly right. We're a niche insurance company, services company, and our lead products over the years started credit insurance. We morphed into service contracts. If you think about anything that has a warrant, is a warrantable hard good, we were usually the name behind that, and then that morphed into the wireless space. We became the leading provider of protection for wireless devices, and then for my journey, the big part of that I had a blast with the last 10 years was taking our business model global. And so that's what we did. Really cool niche stuff, great business model. And I tell people all the time, Andy, that I summarize it by, I literally think I had the best big company job anybody could have. I got to be CEO for 11 years and just got to do stuff I kind of never dreamed I'd get a chance to do. So it was a great ride.
But as you described in the book, you reached a point where you felt stuck in this one transformation you had to go through. And so you sought the help of this company, GXG, that you ultimately left your job and purchased. so tell us about that.
Yeah, I bumped into this guy, and he was a friend, entrepreneur. He had started a bunch of different companies. So I always enjoyed meeting with him because it was that kind of other side of the brain. When you're running a big company, you get a little fixated internally. So I love meeting with him. And he had the core of the idea has not changed. We've morphed the business dramatically of how we execute, but the idea is really simple, which is wow. And he didn't use the word stuck. That was actually my word early on. He had a lot of fancy consulting words, and I said, wow, let me simplify this. I'm stuck on these two things. And I said, if you're telling me people that have done these things, and in my vernacular, gotten unstuck, and they're willing to come in and sit around a table and help me do that, I'm all in. Because I don't have any more ideas. I mean, I'd paid millions of dollars for consulting decks. I had hired different people. I was buying companies, and we were still stuck on these two topics. And I thought, why not try it? And so I did it, and it was a game changer. I'll tell you, Andy, not to be too dramatic, but it changed the way I thought about leaders learning forever. And so I did it there, and then I started using the techniques, and we actually built the processes because he was early in his company, and so my team sort of helped him build it. And then when I told the board that when I was going to leave, which my whole idea was great succession plan, I'd really love to leave and go just do different things. I'm healthy and and I'd like to try some things on my own. And literally it's a true story. I had coffee with this guy at Dunkin' Donuts. He called me out of the blue and said, "Hey, we have coffee."
The guy that was the starter, just
the guy that started it.
Founder of GXG.
GXG. So exactly. So we have coffee, and he was trying to figure out how to scale it and what to do with it. And I said, "Hey, I love this idea. If you're still kind of doing it, I love it." And bought the company at Dunkin' Donuts and went home and told my wife I found something to do. So, which she was thrilled about, because
I was going to say she was probably really happy about that.
Yeah, I mean, after 27 years traveling 400,000 miles a year, and I'd been around the house for a couple of months, she was thrilled. So
yeah,
GXG story.
It turned out she liked you traveling all that.
Oh,
so
yeah, it all worked.
Well, so that's interesting. So just to go back to this methodology. I mean, you said you're a CEO of a big company. You'd spent probably millions of dollars with the traditional big consulting companies as you had transformations. But the thing that was sort of the epiphany, if we will, without indulging in that necessarily, is that GXG's MO was what you call this rapid cycle learning was,
right.
Instead of fancy consultants, I'm going to talk with people that actually have done this job or something like this job that we need to accomplish. You call them operators.
Yeah.
And that you found that way more cost-effective, way more effective, way more cost-effective than the consultants you've been using before.
Yeah, that's a great summary of it. I feel now like I could have written the book or have you do it in 12 pages. So this is good. No, really, because that's a great summary of it. And I tell people all the time that I don't ever want to try to overcomplicate this and make it something it's not. It is that simple, where I just believe that the majority of things that as leaders we get stuck on that we are trying to do, somebody else has figured it out. I mean, there may be a few things if you're going to do the next iPhone or something, but most of us as leaders, we're trying to solve for things other people are doing. Where we get in trouble is when we get outside of our core business and we're trying to do new stuff, right? There's another technical consulting term. And that's what I was trying to do at Assurant. As I said, we kept trying to morph the company. We were great at our core business, but guess what? Core businesses tend to go away. So when we wanted to do new stuff, and new stuff is hard. And the reason is, that's why I put that little formula in there, that W equals K times E. My definition of wisdom is the intersection of both knowledge and experience. And so what I found was the consultants had massive knowledge, far bigger brains than mine, better education, the whole thing. And in my case, paid $6 million a year for that consulting firm deck, and board loved it. Great information. The problem is there was no E. And again, I'm not being critical of that. It's a brilliant business model. But for me as a leader, there was no E. There was nobody to tell me, okay, here's all these facts. Now, guess what? I've done this. And if you go down road A, you're going to get run over. Right? Well, wait a minute. That's not in the deck. Yeah, it's not, because this is how it works. And road B is a better road. And it really is that simple. Now, again, there's lots of tentacles where we go down depending on the engagements and the topics. But that's the beauty of it. If you put the right wisdom in the room on any topic, I think we've been through about 12 different industries and several hundred topics. It's super fun, Andy, watching that little sort of secret sauce happen, which is people sharing their wisdom for one purpose, and that's getting people unstuck. This is not about all-knowing wisdom and pontificating. This is about getting people unstuck, and it's a blast. I'll have to tell you, it was so helpful for me, and I just love seeing very complex, stuck issues get solved. And we trademark rapid cycle learning because this is how we were supposed to learn, I believe, and this moves very quickly. Very quickly. I mean, and you're a perfect example on that with your background and experience and knowledge in sales. 10 minutes with you is worth hours, or in some cases, decades with other people. It's that simple.
Yeah, I'd like to believe that.
I believe that.
Yeah. So yeah, let's start with your equation, because I like books with equations. I've got whole slide decks full of equations where I've reduced sales to equations, because I think it's a fun way to look at things. Yep. So yeah, you talk about wisdom equals knowledge multiplied by experience, but you had a couple definitions in the book I thought were really interesting too, that you had cited. One, somebody defined as expertise in the fundamental pragmatics of life, and I thought that's a great view of wisdom.
Yeah. Yeah, and I love it as well because, again, I think one of the things, fortunately, early on, somebody taught me is we tend to overcomplicate a lot of these
Right.
things in
Right.
leadership and business in general. And if we
Absolutely.
really strip it back, there's only a couple things that matter. So I love the whole pragmatic concept, the approach, and again, finding people that have that specific wisdom, not other wisdom, and that's just a very practical and sort of pragmatic approach.
Yeah, I mean, I take a very similar approach in sales.
Yeah,
I say there are four things you need to know or you need to have in
yeah,
sales, but it's the ability to connect,
yeah,
curiosity,
yep,
understanding, and some level of acumen.
love it.
And you don't really need anything else. I mean,
I love it.
if you can do that, what else is there?
I couldn't agree more. And
Yeah. Well,
yeah,
that
no,
simplicity, I think, is so critical because it's we're certainly in an age and certainly in a lot of segments of the sales world where technology has created this complexity in terms of automating processes and what I call sort of the mechanization of sales. That what we're finding is that we can do all these things, but it's not making people perform at higher levels
oh
as you
no,
would expect.
I couldn't agree more.
So that addition of technology, as it
Yeah.
hasn't helped in the regard that we want, which is sort of true across our economy in general.
Oh, it absolutely is, and now, unfortunately, see, because I shared with you before we started, my core background was in sales, so now I'm fixated on your four things, right?
Hmm.
Because I mean that it really is. I mean, it's so smart because if I think about connecting, in my vernacular would be the relationship
Yep.
part of it, and how I do that. Curiosity is us asking the right questions and
Hmm.
just questions in general, and I've got to dissect all that and synthesize it and actually give something valuable back and do it in a way that's fairly articulate to me as the acumen. And I'm like, that's a very cool way to describe and say that's all you need. That's I love that.
Well, when I looked at your equation, wisdom equals knowledge multiplied by experiences. Increasingly, I sort of look at not when I hear the word knowledge or see the word knowledge, I
Yeah.
replace it with understanding.
Uh-huh.
Because I think that's what you're hiring these operators to do is they understand, not just that they know, but they
Yeah.
understand.
Yeah,
And
I think that's right. Yeah. Yeah.
because we have a lot of information in the world, but how does it transition from being information to knowledge is yes, people understand how the context in which you apply it.
Oh yeah, no,
And
I love that, and I love how people sort of play and massage the formula a little bit because, another way to think about that would be it's this intersection of knowledge and experience that actually creates the understanding, which to me I could even substitute for wisdom. So I love the way we can sort of ebb and flow the formula for what feels right in terms of the language and the meeting, but I don't think the concept changes, right?
yeah.
Where it's got to be both. That's my only point.
So how do you find in your business these operators
Yeah,
that because it seems like that'd be a substantial part of your business. You take on a new
it is.
client, it's
Yeah.
like, I need to find something that matches up. And it's funny, there was a or is, I guess, a business that started a startup in New York, in Manhattan that was matching in a sales perspective, was matching operators, sort of using your words. So if you were trying to get into Deloitte, let's say, is they had recruited sort of this roster of people that had been at Deloitte and knew how to navigate Deloitte, and you could sort of hire these people as sort of they call it an emissary, as your emissary to help you perhaps be more effective selling within that organization.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Yeah, no, I love those kind of concepts. And when we get into the sales piece, I can share with you some of our sort of advisory board work we do around sort of your core topic. But the simple answer on the finding people is
Hmm.
it's actually one of the favorite parts of our business model is um, people love to share their wisdom, Andy. The key is you have to ask them in the right way, and you have to make it extremely easy for them to do it, right?
Right.
And it's super rewarding. We have an enormous network now of people that have worked with us that love sharing their wisdom. what I hear the most is this whole spirit of reciprocity, I think, is alive and well, meaning,
Mm-hmm.
yeah, I'll go do your stuff, Craig, because I always learn more than than they do, is my feeling.
Mm-hmm.
And that's just kind of grown exponentially the last 4 years. Typically, whether it's an advisory board or we have an interesting way we do leader coaching. With this network of people, but inevitably they finish one of our engagements helping us, and they just want to tell other people about it, and they want to do more of it. And we've got a great team that does the outreach and explains it. And we want people to buy into our methodology. And we've just been very fortunate. People, it's different. It's very unique than traditional consulting, very different than, as you know, there's a lot of companies out there now that do these conversations with people, some really good companies where they pay for an hour to talk to a tax expert or a legal expert.
Mm-hmm.
It's a cool business model, but it's not what we're doing. We are very narrow and deep because, again, I'm an operator. My passion is I want to get you unstuck, and I want to see a smile back on the leadership team's face because we got a future. Most of my first conversations, it's just been fun. I've gotten to meet hundreds of C-suiters the last couple of years, and a lot of them are clients now. And my first conversation is almost universally the same when I get introduced to somebody or a first meeting and I get a chance to sit down with them. It's like, wow, that look on your face and the way your office looks a lot like mine did 12 years ago before some of this stuff started to help me.
Right.
And I mean that. I mean, I have a lot of passion for this because I sat in that chair for a long time, 11 years, or as a public company, we call that 44 quarters. And you know what that means, right?
Yep.
It's a hard job. They're just super hard jobs. So I have a lot of empathy for that. And part of my motivation is, man, I got this little secret sauce that I was fortunate to learn, and I want to share it. And, if you want to try it, great. If not, then, others are really enjoying it.
And it seems to me, I mean, so first is your definition of stuck. Let's dive into that, because you talk about the further change takes you from your core competency.
That's right.
And the greater the likelihood of being stuck. And you phrase as an organization, but we do have the sales audiences listening. It applies to you as an individual as well.
Oh, absolutely. In fact, we're already working on a cool second edition to the book, because since I started doing that book, and I won't tell you how long ago, because even though it's 100 pages, it took me a while. Part of it was paring it down, like we said. But since then, our coaching practice has really taken off. We call it impact coaching. And it's the same methodology as having wise people teach very specific things to leaders that are stuck individually. So you're exactly right. The methodology we found works just as well, both when people are stuck as an organization, but also leaders, because that's what an organization is just a compilation of people, right? And most of our clients today do our corporate stuck work, which is really through an advisory board format, and as well do multiple leaders working through the same methodology individually. And the same thing applies, Andy, where, my hypothesis has been, I think we've proven this, is that where our work really helps is not around the fringe of the core, right? I mean, if you're not doing that well and you're stuck, there's some other issues that we should talk about.
Right.
That's
more
not
systemic issues, right?
More systemic issues. But what I mean by this is, and what I've found over the years is, we always thought that moving outside of the core meant, I make water bottles, now I'm going to make chairs, as an extreme example. And that'd be pretty extreme, and you'd probably get stuck. But what I found is you don't have to move that far from the core. And what happens to that wisdom formula, the knowledge and experience, it doesn't go down incrementally, unfortunately, it's exponential. And this is the trap that I fell in. I mean, everything I do right now is because they were traps I fell in. And that's where I was struggling. I thought I was just moving slightly to another sort of different variation of the business model, and we just collapsed. We struggled. We got stuck. And it frustrated me. It's like, wait a minute, we got a great team and I'm super smart. We're all super smart. And all of a sudden, when I learned this stuff, I realized if you really dissect it, we actually have a probability exercise we take people through now to diagnosis. It takes, 20 minutes, not hard. And all of a sudden you realize, wait a minute, our real knowledge and experience just fell off the cliff. No wonder we're stuck, right? And so that's why But again, the same methodology works for an individual, and we call them moments that matter. Right. So if you think about organizations, what do we do? When do moments that matter? When we get promoted, so we have new stuff to work on. Or this happens a lot where boss comes in and just piles on a bunch of new stuff. You haven't even been promoted, but you're supposed to go execute. Right. You might be in succession for another job. Those are all moments that matter. Right.
Or a new boss.
Or a new boss. But so how are we supposed to, because inevitably you're going to move outside of your core of what you were doing to something new. So what do we do as organizations to help people do that? And I would argue, because we did this, not much. Not much. We talk about it a lot, and we send people to little classes, or we say we're going to have a mentoring program in the company. That was always my favorite. Or we're going to rotate people around. And guess what? We usually don't do that. And if we do, how many peers actually tell other people their secret sauce? Not many. It's human nature.
Right. So, but here's a question for you.
Sure.
Because it just triggered a thought as people, as you start moving, you say, away from your core competency, is what you think are sort of, hey, I can see where I am and I can see where I need to be. I just don't realize there's this huge yawning chasm between me and that where I want to go. But the impact oftentimes is as much about not your job skills, but your personal skills.
Oh, absolutely.
And absolutely. This is the part I think that, because it triggered a thought you talked about, we send people to training and so on, is I've got this belief that, every role, there's the human element and the job element, right?
Couldn't agree more.
And as companies, we only train the job element.
And
we just sort of assume that people know how to do the human part of it, which is the foundation, right? If you don't have that, the rest doesn't really matter as much.
Oh, I couldn't agree more, Andy. In its simplest form, if you picture sort of an ecosystem, that's what we draw for everybody. So if I put a leader in the middle, and let's just take, we were working, for example, a lot of new CFOs. So we pluck people in the CFO role, and I say CFO and IT and even sales leaders, we pluck them in there because they were really good at the technical stuff they were doing, right? And now we've put them in this big leadership role. And to your point, that's more, it's not the technical issues. There's certainly, they know all this stuff, but it's not all of it, but they know most of it. But what's more about are the personal things, which gets into some pretty meaty topics, actually. How is that person going to go create fellowship? Do they even understand really what management processes and thoughts as a human being look like, right? And so I just argue that you can go take some classes, but what if I put you in facilitated conversations with people that are great at that? And they start to teach you. And again, all I'm doing is saying, hey, I'm going to go back to that. This is not a new concept. This is how education started. I do have that on my side. If you track the history of education, how did we learn? Wise person teaching the less wise person, right? And that's all we're doing in this concept. And it's those, what people call, and it drives me crazy, these soft skills, right? Well, what does that even mean? Right? I mean, they're just skills, right? And a big part of it is the personal part and who we are and how we behave and how we create fellowship and how we lead people, and other people can teach us that.
Yeah. What I think, to your point about soft skills, I agree that the terminology really sucks. And it's somebody commented on one of my LinkedIn posts in the last week or so, is because we had sort of touched on that topic. He was saying, yeah, let's just rename that, right? Because that's foolish. Since they're so critical, why don't we call them power skills?
I love it. And I would say in the sales world, there's very few things as important to this. So if I'm a senior salesperson, or particularly I've gotten promoted to sales leadership, I mean, and again, you do this full time. I did it because I loved it even as a CEO. But I can tell you, in the course of what I grew up doing and the tenure that I had as a CEO, there were very specific people that I believed got all of that right. In fact, the 4 things you just rattled off, which I love, that just crushed them. So if I've got a new sales leader, stick with that example, wouldn't it be cool if I had those 3 people actually teaching them what that meant, what it looked like? Because they didn't start out that way. I just don't believe in the whole, whether it's a natural salesperson or a natural leader. Yeah, maybe there's some qualities that are better. I think if we want to, we can learn this stuff. The challenge is, where do we get the learning from? And that's all we're trying to solve for. It's just a piece of it.
Yeah, and I just think about it in the context of coaching, because there's a huge emphasis these days in sales on coaching, and of course the problem is that companies don't invest in training their sales leaders how to be coaches. But besides that, it's all good.
I agree.
But it is. I could see this being interesting model in sales organizations where they have a roster of people outside the company who could be resources they tap, not on a weekly basis necessarily, right? Because suddenly that relationship changes. But somebody that, maybe, hey, we'll find somebody for you as a sales manager once a quarter to talk to. Somebody that's done this. That's they're not going to be holding your feet to the fire every week, but
that's right.
Can help you.
No, that's exactly right, Andy. And what we try to do, the way our stuff is most effective, we find, is we want to do immersion first. So I love getting a hold of, in your case, sales leaders that are relatively new to the role, or they've gotten new responsibilities, or it's gotten bigger, whatever the moment the matter is, and then do an immersion. Say, okay, and it's funny, people can answer this question usually in 5 minutes. You tell me, not HR, not your boss, but you tell us, what are the 2 or 3 buckets of wisdom, knowledge, and experience that you would love to have in this newish role as soon as you possibly could? And if you ask that simple question, most people can rattle it off and very quickly. And I do it in an ecosystem. So I put them in the middle circle and say, just draw me 3 bubbles of that stuff. So we do a bit of an immersion for the first 3 to 6 months, which is, okay, we're going to go get 4 or 5 people that that love this stuff and they want to help people. And we're going to facilitate these conversations and immerse you in it. And then what happens from there is exactly what you said. We want people then to build a network. Most of us, I don't know about you, but coming up in the corporate environment, I never had a network of people that helped me. I had a busy job and I had a network in our little vertical, but they weren't really a network. And so what I get great joy out of, we do the immersion, and then what happens is they naturally select 1 or 2 people that are lifetime, quite candidly, usually friends, but certainly mentors.
Right.
And I get really excited about that because it to me, again, it's just the most effective way to learn, and it works.
Absolutely. I mean, I've done an informal survey on this program asking guests over 800 plus episodes about how did you learn how to sell?
Right.
And invariably it comes back to a mentor.
Right.
Not company paid training, none of these things. It's like, there was this 1 or 2 individuals throughout my career, and this is true for me as well, that had outsized impacts in terms of
bingo.
Exposing me to a way of looking at things that I wouldn't have thought of before.
That's it, Andy. I mean, you hit the nail on the head again, and that's why, again, I don't like to over glamorize our business model, because all we try to do then is bring structure and intentionality to that very point. Because you were fortunate, I was fortunate too. My initial mentor was a very heavy, brilliant strategic selling person, right? But not everybody gets that, or if we do, we were just lucky. So all we want to do is say, okay, if that's your role and that's what you want to go do, let's be intentional and super structured to bring that to you, right? And that's the fun part to me, because once people try that and they realize, wow, first of all, it was easy because somebody else is doing all the work. I just got to jump on Zoom, or back when we had face-to-face meetings, but I just got to jump on Zoom. And in 55 minutes, I get a fire hose that now I can go process and work on and get better. And then we get to do it again. Oh, by the way, with somebody else who's got a slightly different perspective, but just as much wisdom. And that's what we do. I mean, and it's just so much fun to see people change. And I tell people all the time, particularly leaders, and if we get involved in any CHRO folks in this, I said, look, this work, what I've seen now after 4 years and saw at my own company, is I want it to move the needle. I talk about needle movers all the time because I don't want to do stuff that's just incremental for individuals. And I only want you to pay us if you see dramatic shifts in these people in terms of their performance, their behavior, whatever we're working on. And that's we've been fortunate. That's what's happened so far, is we see individuals moving the needle, and then companies too that are willing to have the humility to dive into this stuff, because it does take a lot of humility.
Well, it does. And I mean, you wrote about humility as one of the sort of 5 steps of
5
how to
favorite
get
topics.
unstuck.
Yeah.
And yeah, I mean, first of all, I love that. I sort of spun that a little differently in my mind because absolutely this idea of intellectual humility is so crucial because that is the biggest barrier to people learning.
Yeah.
Right? Is if you've read about the Dunning-Kruger effect, the study done by the Cornell sociologists, that most people suffer from this feeling they know more than they actually do, and as a result, they're not
Absolutely.
open to learning more. Right?
Yeah.
But I see that as really vulnerability, is the willingness to be intellectually humble, is really to be vulnerable, because you have to say, especially as leader, yeah, I don't know everything.
That's
And
right.
so
I
oftentimes
completely
when
agree
people
with
see
that.
this humility, they think about the sort of the self-effacing humility, but it's really vulnerability. And
Yeah.
as a leader,
No
that's so
doubt.
powerful to say, yeah, I don't know everything.
It absolutely is. And the only reason I sort of double down on it in the book is I kept getting asked, like, particularly people that were super intrigued with our business model and were willing to try it, was, well, what's the number one thing you're looking for, and what's the number one reason this might not work? And all I could come up with is, as long as you have real humility, and I love your
Mm-hmm.
vulnerability twist on that, but as long as you have that, we've had virtually 100% success. If you
Right.
think you have it, it will be exposed in the first 5 minutes, and if you really don't. And we've had some of that. Now we've gotten
I'm
through it,
sure.
and it's been eye opening to people. But it's shocking when people, and most people will say they have it, but all of a sudden you get in there and you can see on people's faces that, wow, these 4 people in this room, they have a lot more knowledge and experience than me, and I'm going to push back. And fortunately, we've been able to push through that. It doesn't happen a lot. I've actually been quite encouraged that I think, particularly now, I actually think nothing like a good old pandemic to drive a lot of humility in people if you didn't have it before. But I've been encouraged. I found that most leaders have it. It may take a little bit to tap into it, but most have it.
Yeah. Okay. So, well, I think these days it's hard to get to the top, without that. I mean,
Oh,
there's
yeah, I agree.
obviously we see public examples that are the contrary, but in general, I think in corporations, you have to have that to get to the top. So the second step in getting unstuck, first you got to be open, you got to be vulnerable, you got to be humble. Is then you got to decide where you're going.
Yeah.
And I like sort of your little way you diagram. So tell me about how you diagram when you draw the destination.
Yeah, I love pictures. And if you're I'm at this client with, our room is full of flip charts. I'm not a big PowerPoint guy. I love flip charts and drawings, and so that's why they wanted to share some of that in the book. Because again, it's back to what we talked about earlier, Andy. I think we overcomplicate some of this stuff, and
Mm-hmm.
so I just challenge our clients, people we work with, this whole idea of A to B. Let's just build the road from A to B, and along the road are these wisdom gaps. Right. But let's be really clear on B. I'm amazed, and we work some really big, some of our Fortune, 20 companies. And I'm kind of amazed that a lot of times we're putting a lot of effort in a destination and we don't have a lot of clarity of what it looks like.
Mm-hmm.
So we spend a little bit of time on that. Hopefully they've already done that work, but we can help with that. But more importantly is that road is windy. And that's why we tend to draw the picture that way, because it is windy. And it's windy because there's lots of ups and downs, and those create these wisdom gaps. It's new stuff that we haven't been exposed to. So that's our process, and we have a blast with it. It doesn't take long. We do these pretty quickly. And if you ask people, once we clarify the destination, and similar to the individual I mentioned earlier, same process. We just ask them, what are the 2 or 3 or 4 buckets of wisdom that are imperatives? You have to have these to get to point B. And people can usually rattle them off pretty darn quickly. It's amazing. And
Well,
then
and the question though is, are they right?
yeah, I would say in general, especially if we're with a senior leadership team, I'd say they're pretty accurate, because they quickly either get to consensus in a group setting, or they realize they don't have consensus on B, and they have huge disagreements on what internal wisdom they actually have. Now, some of
Mm-hmm.
those sessions can go on a while because we got to get to the bottom of that. But you talking about healthy, candid, humble conversations, right? If my position is we are amazing at technology, and I'm going to check that box because that's not an issue to get to be, and three other senior leaders are going, nope, that's really, really wrong, and we're terrible at that. Well, we got to figure that out. And the way we do it is we actually have people. That's what that probability game I mentioned. We actually have them score it themselves. They get the grade
Mm-hmm.
themselves, and it's a blast because if you let them do it, they don't really know what we're doing. Quite frankly, they're just rattling off. It doesn't have to be terribly scientific, but it's close enough. It's directionally correct. And like I said, I've been doing this for 4 years, and the average score, self-score, and point B is pretty important. The average self-score is usually around 60%. And it's shocking to teams once we sort of add it up and do the math and we do it live and we're sitting there going, okay, so B is this big old hairy thing that the whole company wants you to get to. How do you feel as a leadership team that your self-score is about 60% chance to get there, right? That's pretty cool. And it's kind of a hard thing.
Yeah. Well, it's humbling.
It's humbling, and what people usually want to do is change my methodology in the score, which is kind of funny. And then I just push them that the question I want to answer is, who's walking down the hallway to tell the boss that, hey, good news, we got a 60% chance of getting you to point B. And so it's kind of a fun process. It can be hard, but the point I'm trying to make to folks is that it's okay. I mean, because the question really is on that B, is that new stuff? So what I'm trying to make the point of is it's okay. Why would you expect to have all this wisdom in the new stuff, right? So some of the stuff along the way, you're at 80, 90, maybe even 100%, but there's always 2 or 3 buckets that you don't have. Well, let's go find it real quick. Wouldn't that feel good? Let's go find it.
and so for people listening to this, you're in sales, as Craig described, these wisdom gaps, those are opportunities for you as a salesperson, right? This is we're only at step 2 of 5, but step 1 as a seller, if you go into a sales situation thinking that you've got a process and every customer is just like every other customer, you're going to be disappointed. And so you have to have the intellectual humility to understand that every customer is unique, and then you have to help them understand the destination of where they're trying to go. That's right. And the problem. There are these wisdom gaps, as you described, that this is, an iterative process you go through. Is your opportunity exists to help them fill those wisdom gaps.
Oh, absolutely. And again, I can't get, I wrote them down as you're talking, so I can't get out of your 4 pieces out of my head. I think in ecosystems, right? So if I look at that and go, okay, that is a beautiful, to me, those are buckets of wisdom. So, right, to be really good at that curiosity, understanding, and acumen, to me, that's going to take the combination of knowledge and experience. Those would be a perfect example. I could draw an ecosystem, and that would, to me, would be my prototype successful strategic selling person. Okay. And so I would just ask the question of somebody aspiring to be that good of, okay, you're probably partway there, at least on some of these. So where are the gaps here, right? And how would we score ourselves on some of these topics? And again, I wouldn't expect them to be all of them, and they're going to be at different levels. But the ones that are really, really low, let's go find people that can quickly fill the gap for you, and do it through a series of really intense conversations and learning. That's it.
Yeah.
Right. And so you're, from a sales application, the work you do is a great setup for that conversation.
Yeah. Who knew? Okay. So
who knew? It's awesome. The other steps go super fast, so don't get discouraged.
Step 3, smart people ask for what they need. That's I mean, this whether you're doing it for your personal development or whether it's your clients asking you.
That's right.
They do. I mean, I tell sellers all the time is because everybody says, people don't have time to talk to salespeople, blah, 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 blah. And I'm like, well, when you talk to a customer, why do you think they're talking to you?
That's right.
Well, because they need your help. It's that simple. If they didn't need your help, they wouldn't be talking to you.
That's right. You get it completely on that. Absolutely.
So this is, hopefully your buyers are smart people. asking you for your perspective.
Yeah.
And if you don't have a perspective to give, if you're stuck as a seller in this one model and you don't have the intellectual humility and you haven't identified your gaps, then yeah, maybe you can't help. But that's you want to be in a position to help.
That's exactly right. You would not be in a position to do that. Couldn't agree more. Yeah.
And so step 4, thinking outside the building, not outside the box. Well, I think this is critical. I think that even if again, from a sales perspective, even if your company doesn't provide the resources, you need to go find the resource.
That's right.
There was an interesting book written recently by a guy named Roger Connors called "Get a Coach, Be a Coach," and saying that there's an emphasis on coaching, but hey, the way companies do it's not very scalable and maybe insufficient for what you need. You need to go get a coach or get a mentor and build the networks as you talked about.
Yeah, that's right. And I'm encouraged to hear that because it is a challenge with so many companies and leadership that this is, and one of the reasons that on the coaching piece, that's why we wanted to sort of change the name, change the way people think about it, because over the years, and I don't know if it's your experience, it took on a very negative connotation. And again, we did this in my own company. It's like, okay, well, John or Jane down the hall is kind of messing some stuff up. Let's go get him a coach. It's like, wow, that's okay, but that shouldn't be our go-to solutions, particularly then when we go to the high potential people and we're like, hey, which should be great news. We're going to go invest in you to help you get to point B. And so that's what, again, the paradigm drives me crazy because it should be one of the most important and positive things that we can do, I believe.
Well, unfortunately, increasingly in sales, coaching is deal coaching, right? Opportunity coaching. Let's look at your pipeline. What do we need to, as opposed to, what do I need to do to help this person become the best version of themselves?
Absolutely.
And that part increasingly is missing because now that we have the ability and such insight from a data perspective into every activity that a seller takes, the tendency is to fall back on those metrics as opposed to the person.
Couldn't agree more, and it drives me a little nutso because we do quite a bit of work around strategic selling, advisory board work, and different parts of because I love strategic selling and sales process, and it's so funny that usually the conversations start with, so the output of this is you're going to teach everybody how to close more business. Like,
no,
it's not really what we're talking about here. And again, I go back to your 4-part model. No, I know I can raise, and whatever your things are, we can raise that IQ quickly through our methodology. And if done right, and these are in your case, the 4 right things, or this company's 3 right things, then yes, by definition, they should be more effective. But I share your frustration when it's this tactical fixation of there's some magic wand that we can wash over a salesperson and they go from 20 to 40% close rate the next day. Super goofy, I think.
Yeah, that's a topic you and I can talk about offline. That one drives me nuts. For people listening, I really encourage you to grab the book. Because if you're feeling stuck, it's like a lot of salespeople feel stuck these days.
Absolutely.
And part of that is that, again, is the impact of embrace of technology is that our processes have become much more compliance oriented, let's say. And as individuals, it'd be interesting your take on this actually, because you came up through sales, is there's a lot less autonomy given to sellers these days. I don't know if you see that. But
I totally agree. Yeah.
And the way you become good is by learning how to do things your way, I believe. And it requires a certain amount of autonomy. And I actually encourage people to grab it. Yeah, even if you have to push back on your boss. I mean, that's how I came up through sales.
Yeah.
I had a reputation for never saying yes to anything. The boss said, I think you should do something this way.
Yeah.
I'd say, well, let me think about that.
Yeah, I love it.
And because I knew it was, I was responsible for delivering the outcome. And oftentimes it could be great advice, but I wanted to see how it was going to fit in and how I would implement it. And some bosses just didn't like that. I had one say to me, "Don't you ever say yes to anything?"
No,
the harsh answer was, "No, I don't."
I love it.
But I think we need sellers to embrace that. And I see this, the outline of what you've put together in this book is one way to sort of look at how do you grab autonomy.
Yeah, I think it is because, and again, I go back to where I started earlier. If in the sales context, if on that topic alone, if that was one of the bubbles that we got to get better at, then having an Andy and 2 or 3 other Andys who had the knowledge and experience to help coach and teach through that, you're just going to get there faster. And that's where you mentioned earlier, stuck to me, stuck doesn't mean that we're not trying and we're not working hard. It means we're not getting there fast enough. So this whole thing is built around not a lack of effort or caring, it's a lack of speed. And this is the dramatic impact, is it will help people do exactly what you said much faster. And there's the power of this other wisdom that does it.
Yeah, and I think people need to think about, in this environment we're in, where this tremendous amount of change and rapid pace of change, is I think people need to think about the fact that they need to be able to change at least as fast as their world is changing. Right? I mean,
absolutely.
You sort of have to look at it that way. It's like,
I think you're spot on.
If you're in a certain industry and it's changing you have to change at the same rate of speed. I mean, it's sort of analogous to, as a company, you need to be growing at least as fast as your market's growing, right?
It is. Yeah, you're spot on. And that's why we do so much technology related work. I mean, we cross the whole board, but if you think about how fast that's changing from a leader perspective, I mean, what happens in AI today is different than yesterday. You can't pause and go to class because time the class is done, it's something different. But we can put you in front of operators that are super wise on today's news. And it is that same in sales. I mean, the techniques, the opportunities to me in sales have never been better. I think high quality strategic salespeople have an incredible future for that very reason, because a lot is changing and a lot of tools have changed and a lot of methodologies. Goes back to the 4 things that you preach about, but the how-to on a lot of those and ways to do it, there's wonderful people out there that can help with that.
Yeah. All right. Well, Craig, unfortunately, we've run out of time, but it's been fantastic. Really appreciate you stopping by and sharing with us today.
Yeah, no, my pleasure, Andy. Like I said, I love the work you're doing, and really appreciate you having me on. Love the conversation. So thank you very much.
And if people wanted to find out more about GXG or connect with you, how would they do that?
Our company is gxg.co, and my speaker website is craiglemasters.com. And feel free to reach out anyway, and just love to have conversations and help any way we can.
All right. Well, Craig, thanks again.
Appreciate you. See you.
Okay, friends, that's it for this episode. First of all, I want to thank you for taking the time to listen. I am so grateful for your support of this show. And I want to thank my guest, Craig Lemasters, for sharing his wisdom with us today. If you enjoyed this episode, please subscribe to this podcast, Sales Enablement with Andy Paul, on iTunes, Spotify, or wherever you listen to podcasts. And if you could also leave us a rating or a review and let us know how we're doing, we'd appreciate it. You can do all that on your phone in less than a minute as soon as this episode is over. So thank you for your help. And as always, thank you so much for investing your time with me today. Until next time, I'm your host, Andy Paul. Good selling, everyone. Ever wish you could coach like you've listened to every sales call without actually having to listen to every sales call? Conversation AI from RingDNA uses the power of artificial intelligence to help busy sales managers know exactly where to focus their coaching efforts. Learn which talking points are working and which are falling flat. ramp new reps faster, and help your entire team master the art of conversation. Unlock your team's full potential with the power of AI. Learn more at ringdna.com/CAI. That's ringdna.com/CAI.